They raided my house. They raided my parents' house. They raided the headquarters of my movement. They imprisoned tens of people. And then the number two of the regime goes to my house at midnight, talks to my wife and my parents, and he says, there is a plan to kill Leopoldo. You better convince him to turn himself in our terms.
Welcome to Less Than 1% podcast. I'm here today with Leopoldo López, my friend. I'm not going to give away his story. I want to talk to him today, but a reminder to everybody, check us out on all the different platforms. This is our second podcast, and we have an opportunity to really talk to somebody who is what I call a less than 1%er. Just want to remind everybody the origination of this podcast is really about going out and finding people that live outside the box, that disrupt, that maybe have an opportunity to change the world, but they haven't been given that opportunity, or people like them haven't been given that opportunity. And so today we're going to talk to Leopoldo, and we are going to go through your story and find out, how you disrupted, because I think you disrupted a little bit, and your story is so amazing. So first, before we start, I'd like to thank you for coming, because I know you came all the way from Spain, through San Francisco, and I know you did that because maybe we're friends.
Of course, man.
No, yeah, definitely friends. We met at Simon Sinek's event, and that was amazing, massive, and really talked about power at that meeting, and how we share power, distribute power, how do we take power. And your story is really about power. It's about really, I don't want to use your words, but about a regime. You were really trying to change the world through just running for office, which is something here in America we probably take for granted. And then tell me a little bit about that. What made you run for office in Venezuela?
Well, first of all, thanks, Mo. And your story it's incredible too. So I'm glad that you have a podcast and you'll be able to share it with many people. I like the concept of the less than 1%. I'm going to take it home and build on it.
Yes.
So my story is I was born in Venezuela. I had the opportunity to come to the U.S. to study. So I finished my high school, went through college and grad school, and never wanted to stay here. I went back to Venezuela immediately. I worked at the oil industry. I had a great job as an economist, which gave me the opportunity to get to know the country, the economy, the core of Venezuela. And then Chavez came to power in 1999. And he called for a constituent assembly to change everything. That was the beginning of the end, but I decided to run for office. And I had a small movement at the time, and I had to leave my job. So I had a good job, and I had to leave my job to pursue a dream. And I ran and I lost. So the beginning of my formal political career was with a defeat, but I decided to keep going. I went out and found other young people who wanted to go into politics. So a couple of months after that, there was an election, and I ran again to become the mayor of the city I was born in, Caracas, Venezuela, the capital of Venezuela. And I won. I was the underdog. But
you were the less than 1%er. Then no one thought you were going to win.
Literally, I had 2% in the polls when I started.
Wow.
And everybody said, it's impossible. It's impossible. So, I even remember talking to some pollsters, and they said, it's mathematically impossible that you will win.
That sounds familiar.
And then I remember going to someone who was going to help me in my campaign, who was friends of my grandfather. And I went to talk to him, and At the end, he said, "You're not going to win because I really like your grandfather. I'm going to help you." I was like, "No. If you're not even going to listen to
Right.
what I'm going to do as mayor, I'd rather not get your support." And I'm glad I didn't, because they were real estate developers, and we really put the house in order in terms of real estate development in the
So
municipality.
Leopoldo, when you, sorry to cut you off, but so you ran once and lost, and
Yeah.
how old are you at this time?
I was 26.
So you're 26. Like you're just forming, right? And so then you're getting ready to run again, and all these pollsters are saying you have less. Well, you got 2%. You got a better chance.
I had a better chance. I had double than yours.
You doubled the chance. And then at that point, when people are saying you shouldn't run, what's your reaction at that time? What are you feeling inside at that particular time?
No, I'm like, they don't know. I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know what I can do.
Yeah.
I don't want to take things for granted, but I don't want anybody else imposing to me what my potential is.
Right.
And that's been the story of my life. I've swam against the current all my life, and I feel good about it. It's kind of the way I approach things. I don't like to see impossibles, so I like to just chase my dream. And so I lost, and then I won as mayor, and I was very young, and structured a great team of people that were also very young, very committed, well educated in their own specific areas. Combined a team, some people with experience, and we completely changed the municipality. That part of the city became the safest municipality in Venezuela at a time when Caracas was the most dangerous city in the world. We did great things in healthcare. We had an incredible leader, actually, that built a system of public health with ER facilities, ambulances, motorcycles. We were really the vanguard of public health at the time. We changed the city physically. We built parks, plazas. We built theaters and sports facilities. We were able to do all of this because we changed the taxation system. We made it simple. We lowered taxes. We were very, very transparent. And that gave me a big presence, not just for the people in the city, but nationwide. In parallel to my job as a mayor that I loved. I really, really loved my time as mayor. If anyone wants to go into politics, I think that local politics it's just the way to go.
Right.
That's it's like the ER for you. It's where you see the patients. It's where you need to choose and have direct and immediate impact. So things went well, and the municipality very well. But in parallel to that, the municipality became the center of all of the protests. So I had always two hats. The hat as a leader of protests against the regime, and also managing the municipality. So years went by. I ran for re-election. I won with more than 80% of the vote. And
so you went from 2% polling.
I won with 51 my first term, and then with 84% re-election. And then I was running for higher office. And what could have been a blessing became a curse, because I was disqualified by Chavez. I was simply taken out of the ballot box. They opened a bogus case against me, and I was taken out of my career. And that, for me, was one of the toughest moments of my career, because I had a team. I had built a team of hundreds of people who knew how to run a city. And we were building a team to run a country. I had experts in all of the areas, in public safety, in public health, in infrastructure, in healthcare, in budgeting, in administration, legal. I had a great, great team. And when they disqualified me, was like cutting the wings of the entire team. So again, I had to reinvent myself. I was unemployed. I ran for higher office. I was disqualified. So I supported another candidate that had 2% at the time, and he won with my support. And also the candidate that I supported for the municipality also won. But I was unemployed. So I decided to build a new movement. Um, the thing I've done throughout my life is to build movements.
Right.
When I look back at my career is I'm an entrepreneur of social
The
movements.
social
That's
movements.
what I would define the things that I've done. That's what I like to do, to build movements. So I built a new movement called People's Will with very young people from the student movement, local community leaders. And we were focused in doing our activism in two things: nonviolent action and social work. And we had this idea that to become a political leader, you needed to be a social leader first. You needed to be with the people. You needed to just engage in the issues of the people and try to organize. Even without being government, you can do a lot. So we grew very fast. I was recently married with Lillian, who is my soulmate, my companion in this journey. And I got permission from her just to travel around the country every week. So I would leave my house on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and return on Saturday. And I crisscross the country. And I love doing that. I love doing that. And sometimes I would meet with 500 people, 1,000 people, sometimes with 5. And I had the same energy, the same commitment to meet with the 5 or the 500. And that's how you build a movement, because you never know when the leaders are going to be. And I was in search of leaders, not necessarily in search of crowds. So that...
Wow. Okay. Wait, I got to stop you, because that's a, you can't drop that mic, but that's a drop the mic moment. So Jordan, I think we need to write this down. You were in search of leaders, not in search of crowds. That is, because if you're in search of crowds, you're looking for followers. You're looking for people to validate your place in the world. But you weren't doing that. You were looking for people who could help you with your just cause.
I helped them.
Right.
Because that's the name of the game.
Right.
And that,
leaders helping leaders.
And that was my proposal to them.
Wow.
I said, let's build this together. I mean, you want to be mayor of your municipality? I want to help you. You want to be the leader of your community? I want to help you. You want to be whatever you want to be? I want to help you, but I want you to help me. And that's that was. And I remember, we'll get to this, but years after that, I ended up in prison for 7 years. And I remember having a conversation with one of my partners in this journey, and we were joking about it. He said, "Well, I remember when you went to my state and you asked me to join this movement as a partner. Look where the partnership has taken me."
Right.
Well, he became mayor of his town.
Wow.
But we were both in prison. We were laughing about it. Well, the shares of this company took me to prison. I was like, well, man, that's the name of the game. You take risks. And so we built this movement called People's Will, and it was nationwide. It was very successful. And in the year 2012, there was a presidential primary. I was running. I was winning. And I continued to be disqualified. I actually took my case to the Inter-American Human Rights Court, and I won. But the decision was not taken by the regime. So again, I couldn't run. So my political career has been one not of chasing office, has been one of helping other leaders, because I've been incapable of running myself. So the last time I was able to put my name on the ballot was 20 years ago, in 2004.
Wow.
So the last 20 years of my political career has been helping others to reach the positions I'm not able to.
So Leopoldo, the thing. So I of course, before this, we do the LinkedIn biopsy and the Instagram biopsy. I mean, I knew you. It's funny, I knew you as a person before I knew the story. And so it's very interesting. You remember we were sitting, in Colorado, and I was just amazed by your story. But how many, do you know how many Instagram followers do you have?
I think around 1 million and something. And in X, like 5.2 million 5.3.
I mean, I guess why I'm pointing that out is that there are so many people that believe in you, and I think it's, as you said, it's not about you, but it's what you represent. It's what you represent. It's what you represent to the world. The movement that you represent, and the fact that I think you give people a voice that don't have it. So it's so amazing. So okay, so you're now be out of office.
I'm out of office.
You get disqualified every time because they're nervous. Somebody's nervous
imagine,
about you.
You're a basketball player.
Yeah.
My sport is boxing.
Okay.
And surfing. But so I think the analogy plays out better with boxing. I was not allowed to go up to the ring. I wanted to fight. I was trained. I knew I could win, but I was not allowed to step up to the ring.
Not even allowed to compete.
Not even allowed to compete.
And back to the, when I talked to you about less than 1%, right? I mean, that's the problem, right? You were put into a box by whoever, and they did not even want to compete against you.
Yes.
It's terrible.
So I had to reinvent myself.
Yeah.
And I had to say, how do I play this game?
Right.
So the name of the game for me was leadership. Was not office. Was leadership.
Right.
And the name of the game for me was leadership by leading leaders, by creating a community of leaders.
So that's level, what is that? Is that a level 5 leader, right? Leader who creates other leaders.
Well, I mean, I don't know
Maxwell, right? That's Maxwell's.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but that's what I naturally was inclined to do.
Yeah.
And so in 2012, there was this primary. Again, I was disqualified. I became the campaign, the head of the campaign of the other candidate that I endorsed. And in 2013, Chavez died, and there was an election. And this guy did a very good campaign. We did an incredible campaign. And against all odds, he won by a very, very small margin, but he won. And that night, I told him, I said, you already won, but now in order to bring home that victory, you need to take people to the streets. And at the beginning, he said yes. And then he was surrounded by other advisors, and they said, no, you're a statesman, and don't follow that advice. It's just not gonna lead anywhere. So he decided not to do anything, and Maduro stole the election. So I went back to the streets, and there was a municipal election at the end of that year, and we became the movement that won the largest number of municipalities with a commitment to confront the dictatorship. We won with municipal leaders, not saying that we were going to get running water to the neighborhoods or that we were going to improve any of the municipal things. Our main commitment was we want to build a movement to confront and overcome the dictatorship, and we won. And in January of 2014, with Maria Corina Machado, who has become the leader in this year in Venezuela, we actually won the election a month ago. We called for protest, and we called the people to the streets, and tens of thousands of people came to the streets. And on January the 12th of 2014, there was a big protest, and I was leading that protest with nonviolent tactics, very disciplined about our nonviolence. We had been trained in this. I mean, we saw the videos of the October movement in Serbia, of the training sessions of the civil rights movement, you name it. I mean, we were really into understanding how to confront a dictatorship that has the weapons without having the weapons.
Right.
Having the only thing at our disposal, which is the people. People power. So we called for protests, and that day the dictatorship decided to go out and kill. So they killed with 2 shots in the back of his head a kid named Basil da Costa, who's a young carpenter who was 21 years old, and he was shot by the detail of the Minister of Interior. 3 other people got killed that day. And that night, there was a warrant for my arrest. So I decided to go into hiding. I went into hiding, and I had 3 ways I could take that moment. I could stay in hiding, I could leave the country, or I could turn myself in. And I decided to turn myself in. At the time, I thought of 2 people. I thought of my great grandfather, who had been a political prisoner for 14 years, and I thought of Martin Luther King. I had read the letter from the prison of Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
If you've not read this, or those who are listening, I highly recommend to read this document of Martin Luther King, who is one of my heroes. And in that document, he says that nonviolent action is about showing the scars of the putrefied system in order to change the consciousness of the people,
Right.
to bring about change.
Right.
So that's a core of what nonviolent is.
Okay, so let me understand this a little bit. So they're killing people. They're going out, and people who were involved in this movement, involved in trying to make Venezuela a better place, and they're killing these people. And you're like, I'm gonna let me get out of the line of sight real quick. Let me go ahead and stay at home, bunker down, hide out, and then you decide that you're going to give yourself up to the people that have just killed other people.
Yeah.
That
So I turned myself in.
But that takes a level of strength to be able to face, because you don't know what they're going to do to you. They may have killed you.
Yes.
And you knew that was a possibility.
Yes.
And you still turned yourself in.
Yes.
Wow.
And I did so because I was convinced, and I'm still are. I don't regret doing that. I spent 7 years in prison, and I don't regret it, not a single day, because that was the only way at the time to continue the movement. And that was the only way to show the scars of the system. Because at the time, now we know that Venezuela is a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's clear that that it's far from being a democracy. But at the time, talking about 10 years ago, it was still confusing, inside and from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
People still thought that it was a decaying democracy, but a democracy. There was still legitimate recognition of the regime by other governments. So it was very clear to me that that was an important step, just to unmask the dictatorship and call it for what it was. So we were the first people calling Maduro a dictator. We were the first people saying that he was a corrupt, repressive, and that his regime was linked to the narcs. And nobody was saying this. And I remember giving press conferences and the journalists telling me, aren't you afraid that you're going to end up in prison? And I said, I'm just talking the truth. I mean, I hope you're not afraid of printing the truth. I mean, I take responsibility. So I knew exactly what I was doing. And as I said, I was very inspired by the approach of Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've read of all of the leaders of nonviolent action, Gandhi, Luther King, Mandela. And with the figure I identify the most is with Luther King.
Very similar story. And as we get to your story, you actually end up having a very similar, sort of what happened to him in Birmingham is about to happen now. So you decide to go and surrender yourself.
Not surrender.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Not surrender.
Yeah, you turn yourself in.
I turned myself in.
Yes.
And it was a massive...
I like that distinction, though.
Yes,
The
I
fact
like it
that
too.
you didn't surrender, you turned yourself in.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the movement was still continuing.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I was winning.
Yeah.
I was turning myself in and I was winning.
Right.
And because, I mean, they had me as a prisoner, but the movement was in the streets. And the protests continued for 4 months. And the movement grew like it never grew before. So this is a very important distinction, because many people in this space that I live in, human rights defenders, activists, and we can get into what I'm doing now at a global level. But many people see themselves as victims. I have never seen myself as a victim, although I have been, but I don't see myself as such. Because if you see yourself as a victim, you give power to the oppressor. And this is the way it is. If you surrender to a higher power, you are giving that power to them to control you.
Wow.
And I was always very conscious that I was turning myself in, but I was playing the game in my own terms. So I called for a massive protest. I was in hiding. They raided my house. They raided my parents' house. They raided the headquarters of my movement. They imprisoned tens of people. And then the number 2 of the regime goes to my house at midnight, talks to my wife and my parents, and he says, there is a plan to kill Leopoldo. You better convince him to turn himself in our terms. So imagine the reaction of my wife. She reaches out to me and she says, they're going to kill you. And I said, I don't know if they're going to kill me, but what I do know, if somebody's going to kill me, it's them. And they can kill me in a dark alley, they can kill me in prison, or they can kill me in the rally that I am calling the people. And if they're going to do it, I'm going to, just press the limits. And on February the 18th of 2014, with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, everybody dressing in white, I turned myself in. It was a long day. First, they put me in an armored vehicle, and the head of the National Guard was in that armored vehicle, and the roles were completely switched. He was completely nervous. He was calling Maduro the dictator. Yeah, that's
it, right?
That's right. And he was calling the dictator. So what do we do? And then he was preparing to repress the people. And I said, don't do that. And he says, so what do we do? I said, well, give me a megaphone. I'll take care of it. And so he calls Maduro, the president, says, this guy is telling me that he can control the situation if we give him a megaphone. So they gave me a megaphone. And there are pictures of this, surrounded by the military. I was the prisoner, but I was in control.
And you had the megaphone.
I had the megaphone. I was in control. And then they, after like 3 hours, they take me to an airport in the city, surrounded by thousands of people. And we get to the airport, and there were 3 helicopters there. And I said, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to take you to a military base. So they put me in a helicopter, and the 3 helicopters go up because they didn't want the people to know in which one I was. So each one went in a different direction. So we go to a military base in Caracas. From there, they take me to the courts. And from there, they took me to the military prison, where I spent the next 4 years in solitary confinement. And
so I want to talk about, just what you told us so far. At any point in time, and what I'm intrigued with your story this time, hearing it for the second time, is that even now, I don't sense any fear. At any point in time, were you scared? Even if it was for your family, even if it wasn't for your own self, or even if it was for your friends, were you ever scared?
To tell the truth, no. And there were a lot of circumstances. But maybe because I was always involved in sports, maybe, I mean, I've always done combat sports and always extreme sports, maybe, but I was not afraid, because I was very conscious that being afraid was giving power to them as well.
Wow.
That doesn't mean that the circumstances were not critical. But, Mandela wrote something that I always remembered. He said, courage is not about not having fear. Courage is about overcoming fear. And I think he was right. I think he's right. And for me, it was about courage. It's just overcoming fear, overcoming the circumstance. Um, so
So now they take you away.
they take me away. I remember that night. That day started from being clandestine, going into the trunk of a car, going through different checkpoints in the trunk of a car, then going to a rally with hundreds of thousands of people, then into a helicopter. And that day ended up at midnight in a cell that was 1.5 meters by 2 meters, in a part of the military prison that was a building that I was the only prisoner there. I was in the 4th floor. And I remember even the sounds of the locks, of the 9 locks between my cell and the entrance. And you could hear
Each
the
one.
locks and the echoes and then the silence. And that night was very important for me because I had read a lot about what people do in prison, because I knew that this could happen to me. So I read experiences from people in Venezuela, because this is kind of ingrained in the story of Venezuela. Politics is about prison and exile, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. My own great-grandfather was a political prisoner. And what I got from everything that I read was that you needed to have a routine in prison. So I built my routine, which was very simple. I decided that I was going to do 3 things every day, that I was going to pray. I was born and raised as a Catholic, but mechanical in a way. And I'm glad. And I really think that just having a spiritual dimension, whatever it is, whatever God you pray to, however way you do it, I think it's very important to have that, because that gives you a sense of humbling yourself to a higher being, which is, I think, very important. The second thing that I would do every day was to exercise my mind. I would read, I would write, I would, play chess, I would do math, I would, just do things that would keep me active. And I would do physical exercise. And that was my day. And that was the way I set out to myself to win the day. In a way, like the AA, the go by the day, So I took my reality as the presence of every day, and the only thing I was in control of was doing those 3 things every day. And if I did those 3 things every day, I would win the day. So I saw myself as waking up every day and setting myself to win the day. That was my job, to win the day in the terms that I set out for myself to do so. And that was very, very useful. Actually, I then wrote about this method. And since I had more than 500 people from my movement that were also in prison, I made sure that they all got this approach to how to deal with prison. And the other element that was very important was not to deal with time, because time can be a tougher element than the locks. Because if you kneel yourself to time, in the sense that you create an expectation that in a week, in a month, in 6 months, or in the next trial date, you're going to come out, and that doesn't happen, you're crushed. So I never prayed. I prayed every day, and I never asked God for my freedom. I didn't want to make God accountable for that, because that was the one thing I had. I could pray. And I remember a priest once told me that people pray for 3 things. People pray for need, people pray for fear, and people pray for gratitude. And of the 3, the most effective one is if you pray for gratitude. So I started doing that. And when I look back, I was a very lucky person. I have incredible parents. I met my 4 grandparents. I was able to have a good education. I was able to do the things that I wanted. I became mayor. I did many things as mayor. I found an incredible woman who became my wife. I had kids. So I had a lot of things to thank God for.
Right.
And it even got to a point that I was even thanking God for giving me the opportunity of going through this process of freedom, of prison, or thanking God or the circumstance when I could see through the crack of the window I had in my cell, I could see the stars, or I could see the moon,
So
or I
Leopoldo,
could hit the birds.
Leopoldo, you wait a second here, and I keep. So you are thanking God. You're in prison. You're in prison in a cell that is smaller than this room,
Yes.
than this podcast studio, and you're thanking God for the opportunity to experience what you're experiencing. I think, that I'm just thinking about how profound that is. I mean, the thoughts I have about win the day, which I think in the healthcare system, the way we have it today, in it, how complex it is here in America. Now, both of us, I used to live, you currently live in different countries. So, we've had experiences outside with healthcare in other countries. And healthcare is so complex right now in America. But I think if we just won the day, that would change everything, because I think we are focused on time. I think we're focused on tomorrow or yesterday or 7 years from now. And if we just won the day, how much greater, care could we deliver to people who are in need at that time? The second thing I think that's interesting, we have a lot of burnout in healthcare. We have a lot of people that are really frustrated with just taking care of people. I mean, it's ad nauseum, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape. People are coming to you, they're hurting, they're sick, they're sad, and you're supposed to take care of them. But sometimes we don't take the opportunity to have gratitude for the opportunity to be burnt out, for the opportunity to have that, to be able to care for people. So I think those two things, right now, I should be writing down, because these things, you've changed my sort of personal practice just in this podcast. That win the day and be pray for gratitude, not for what I'm scared of, not for what I need, but for what I'm actually grateful. So that's amazing. So now you're in this cell, you're thanking God for the sliver of light, or the sliver of being able to see the stars. So continue there.
But always with a defiant attitude. So every day, I mean, let me make this clear. I was not a monk, I mean, I was praying, yes, but I was always defiant.
Is that boxer in
yeah,
you?
absolutely, absolutely.
So
I mean,
you're
I would tell my guards, because again, I was leading a movement that I knew had millions of people in the streets.
Right.
So I knew, that they knew. So I would tell my guards, I'd say, hey, man, with respect, we can go up and talk to St. Peter. We can go up to, with respect, you have me. But if you shout at me,
none.
I will shout back. And if you push me, I will push back. And I can even hit you. And they would see me training every day in my cell, and they knew I was serious about this. So in a way, I also had to play the psychological game at 24/7. I never allowed my guards to see me laying down in my bed. I never allowed them to see me sad or to see me crying. Or every day they would come at 6 a.m. I was already, I didn't even have a watch, but I would naturally wake up. I only had a bucket of water. I had no running water. I would just wash my face, and I was just sitting there waiting. Never allowed them to see a crack. And that gave me, even though I was in solitary confinement, I knew that my attitude was speaking out to the military, that my attitude was speaking out to the people.
You're still leading the movement.
I was still leading the movement through whatever I could tell my lawyer, or whatever I could tell my wife and my mother, who were the only people who could visit me. The way I would send messages was they would frisk me before receiving any visit, and they would frisk my wife or my mother. So what I did, and I wrote a book using this methodology, is that since it was a military prison, they tried to be very formal. So I complained every day about whatever circumstance, and they said, you need to pass in writing. So they would give me a piece of paper, and I would take, because I had no books or no, at the time I had no books or no paper. Um, it, 4 years was a long time. So at times I had books, at times I gave it away. But I would take the lower part of the paper, and I would write very, very tiny lettering, fold it, wrap it in a plastic, and put it in my mouth. And when my mother or my wife came, I would give it to them. They would put it in their mouth, and then they would go back. They would open it, and they could see kind
Yeah.
of the direction things should go. So that's a way I would talk to my movement. That's a way I wrote actually a book about energy in Venezuela, using this small notes
Yeah.
with very fine print. So I was always very, very active, and I was very defiant. We were able to organize a riot in the prison at one time. We took control of the prison for 24 hours. And
I feel inadequate right now. I mean, I can't even organize. Sometimes I feel like I can't organize,
My own thoughts.
but yeah, across 25 states and 8,000 people from my office, and you're doing it from
but,
prison.
well, I mean, it's just setting yourself to do. So my wife, who was always, always on the front line denouncing what was happening, she was always asking for them to give me the things that by law I could have as a prisoner. I could go to mass and I could go to see the sun. For a long time, they wouldn't allow me to do this, but then they allowed me to go to mass. And I would go to mass in the prison. It was once a week on Wednesdays, with two guards. I would sit in the back with two guards that were only focusing in keeping me isolated from the rest of the prisoners. But when you are in those situations, you get to make decisions on a blink. So I would look at the people, and just by the way they looked at me, I knew who was with me and who was against. The prisoners I'm talking about. And there is a part of mass that you stand up and you
Mhm.
you give peace to people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of the liturgy. So the guards couldn't do anything. So I would stand up and I would tell the people that I knew were with me, or I thought that they were with me, said, peace be with you, my brother. Tell your wife to look for my wife. So
Mm.
my wife, when she was waiting for me for visits, she would be approached by all of these other women, and I created a network. And I asked her to ask them in what floor they were, in what part of the prison. So I kept track of who I had in different parts of the prison, and we created a plan to take control of the prison. Unlike protests, you are ready, but then something sparks the protest. That
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, it happened here with the George Floyd and the
Yes.
Black
Yes.
Lives Matter movement. I mean, just something sparks, and then you have massive protests. So one day the guards mishandled a baby, and that's a no-no in prison. I mean, they opened the diapers, and and that enraged the population, and that sparked the protest. And we had control of the prison for not 24 hours. It was less than that. It was like 16 hours. But it was an incredible moment. We were in victory that day, and then they sent 300 more guards to the prison. After that, things got a lot tighter for
Yeah.
me, but I never regret it, because actually what we did in prison had an impact outside the
Right.
prison.
Right. So you're still being able to impact, and it's giving you purpose. You're still able to advance your cause from prison. But you did tell me about a time where you did crack, or you almost cracked, and you sort of said that, hey, you're not fearful, but I think there were. I mean, again, just from a human perspective, you're away
Yeah,
from
this was
family.
different. Not from fear, but
Yeah.
from so. After 4 years, I got sent to house arrest
Right.
because there was another cycle of protests, and they thought that by taking me to house arrest, the protests were going to fade away. So being in house arrest, I called for protest again. And I got a call at the time. The Pence was vice president, and I got a call from Vice President Pence, and he asked me in the call, "Do you mind if we make this call public?" I said, "No." So that same day, I called for protest. I get that call, and a couple of days afterwards, I got sent back to prison,
Mm,
and that was like descending into hell again.
mm,
Oh, and that I was sent to a punishment cell. I had no idea of the time of the day. It was very, very cold. And I was claustrophobic. I had no sense of where I was, and that was the one time I broke. I thought of the worst thing a human being can think of. There was a cable. It was an a cable jacket. So I took the cable out, started, to think bad things about what to do with that cable. And then the cable had a copper, uh, cable inside. I started like tweaking and just playing with it. And I built a rosary with that. And what could have been, the element of taking my life became an element of
So,
just supporting me with faith.
so this struck me when we first talked. You're looking at this wire and you're thinking, you know, it might be better off if I'm not around.
Yeah.
And
And this is when you don't have control of your mind.
right. No. This is
it's
happening. Right.
it's claustrophobic. The walls are falling on me. I have no sense of time. Can't breathe. You just
So
it's
you're thinking of taking this wire and just ending it. And what made you, so you sort of went from that point to sort of fashioning,
yeah.
right? To use the wire to build something beautiful. What changed? What made you?
I don't know. I mean, I just started to handle the wire in such a way. I said, "Oh, copper is very malleable."
Yeah.
So it's just started doing knots, and I did a cross, and another knot. And I said, "Well, let me do a rosary." And then once I had that, I mean, it was not a wire; it was a symbol. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it was a
absolutely,
symbol. It was a symbol
absolutely.
of faith. It was a
Right.
symbol of something that I could step on at that time, and it was very powerful. I still have it. I gave it to my mother when I left prison. That's the one thing I get with me. I gave it to my mother, and well, it was kind of a journey from the darkest of the dark, to seeing
So
But I
light.
think too. I mean, you say, yeah, that's a at that point you had already. I guess you can say it was your faith that helped you through that. But had you not built that beforehand, throughout the 7 years that you
Yeah,
were praying, and I don't think that would have had maybe not had the same effect,
yeah,
right?
you're right. It was a buildup,
It was a
and
buildup.
that at a critical moment, that was kind of a tool that I was able to reach out to, and that's why I think that people should have a spiritual dimension, whatever
yeah,
it is.
yeah,
But it's just very important that us as human beings understand that we are not in control of everything.
mm-hmm,
That
mm-hmm,
there are some,
yeah.
just higher.
Well, we
Uh,
we talked earlier about sometimes in a history of physicians that there were times where physicians had this God complex. Some physicians
yeah,
where they felt like I'm in control, and a lot of those now I think it's different. I think the training is better, frankly, but I think you're right. When you humble yourself and know that that there's something greater than you, it makes you operate in a very different way. But I think the thing that strikes me about what you said there is that the wire, the copper wire, it could be anything, right? It actually could be the implement of your pain and suffering and your and and weakness in a way. And then it was also the same tool was also a sign of your strength and your faith and your power and your resilience. And I think that that's a point that we really, I think that we forget as human beings. We often look at a tool or an item or an event as one or the other. And here you took something and they were both for you, and you quickly turned. I really think you talk about your faith, but I think there have been times in my life, where I don't know why I did something, and I think this is, when you said you're fashioning the rosary, I can almost imagine that it was similar to times in my life where I would do things and I'm like, I don't remember, I don't understand why I do this. It almost felt like somebody was supporting me through that, whether it's subconscious or higher being or God or whatever. But I think that that's so amazing, to just remember, sit back and think about it. The tool is not important. It's actually how you interpret and use that
how
tool
you approach it
and approach that in your life. So you built this rosary, and then you're back, and then you're back to the same person you win
then
the day,
I'm back.
or?
Then I was taken back to house arrest.
Okay, so you got back out.
And just time went by. Then I was sent back to house arrest. House arrest was tough, like prison, because they made my house and my family being in prison. So my kids had to go to school, and they had to go through a checkpoint of hooded individuals with machine guns. Nobody can come into my house. I was surrounded by 40 guards, and I thought every day that I could be taken back to prison.
Mm.
So it was very unstable. In a way, prison was more stable than house arrest because I knew I was there. There was nowhere to go from prison. But from house arrest, my family was exposed, my kids were exposed, and I knew that because they already done it. I mean, they already took me from house arrest back to prison. So I knew that this could happen. So I spent months there. I was very active, still leading the movement, led a coalition that actually, before the house arrest, we had elections for the National Assembly. And before that election, I did a 28-day hunger strike because the regime was not setting the date to the election. So we wanted to do a hunger strike, but I had read about hunger strikes and about how important is to plan them. The key of a hunger strike is that you have a petition that is viable in a period no more than 35 days.
Mm.
Because if not, you're going to fail. I mean, you're either going to die or you're going to fail. So the key is that your petition is something that could happen in a short period of time. So I knew at the time that there was a lot of pressure to set the date of the election. So I decided to do a hunger strike, and we made it public. More than 100 prisoners throughout the country went into hunger strike, and more than 150 people outside prisons also went on hunger strike. So the hunger strike became the focal point to pressure the regime to set the day of the election.
Okay,
And
so you're just, so it's just water daily. You just
yeah, I was able to get, I had water, salt, and yeah, that was it.
Wow.
And
I mean,
electrolytes.
not to.
I lost 14 kilograms.
I was going to say, like, I
and
mean,
it's not like I'm not on the heavy side.
Yeah, and you're not. You're thin. You're very in shape. I mean, I don't know if I can not eat for 35 seconds. I mean, I'm like, I got a little extra here in 35 days. So how long did it actually go?
No, it was 28 days. The
So
hunger
28.
strike was
Okay,
28 days.
Yeah. So you'd not eaten for 20, and they did pass the petition.
And we won.
Wow,
And
that's
we won.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's
You have a strength, Leopoldo. Every time I talk to you, you have a strength that is unparalleled. Your strength is I mean, your ability to sacrifice. I use that word. I don't like the word sacrifice, by the way. I think it's a very, because there's a lot of things that we do that are self-interested, and there's really no true sacrifice.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're literally putting your life on the line, putting yourself at risk. And I think that is true sacrifice.
That's
And
true sacrifice.
I'm intrigued by your strength. Where do you think that, because I want to ask you another question. I know we have more to the story, but I want to ask you another question right after this. Where do you think that strength comes from?
Well, I don't know, man. It's just the way I am and the way I was brought up.
So you don't see that as strength. You
No,
see that as sort of the,
just the way
this is how
yeah.
you
I
are.
mean, I think if you kind of overanalyze,
Yeah.
what you are, you might be kind of
You might be-
overdoing it.
yeah, you're doing too much.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the
Yeah.
way I approach life. I do think that sports and my upbringing with extreme sports put me always on that edge.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that was important, and also, of course, the most important thing is to have a purpose,
Yes.
and
Yes.
to have a purpose that you approach, that you work towards with no drama.
Yeah.
In
So
the sense that you don't put the entire weight that I'm doing this, I'm a great person,
Right. Right.
people need to recognize me, because I think one key thing is that you do what you do for your own conviction.
Yes.
Because I've been on top and I've been at the bottom. I've been rallying with 500,000 people, and I've been at the spotlight of being criticized for not taking the dictatorship down. So I've been at the top, I've been at the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been in that roller coaster.
And you're still
Uh,
you. You're
and
still
you're still you.
authentically you.
Yeah. And the dictatorship, and this is true for dictatorships globally. And later we will talk about what I'm doing with the World Liberty Congress. But they go after you in assassinating your character.
Right.
This
right.
is something that they put a lot of effort. And I have been at the center of character assassination by the regime for years.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that they say, the type of attacks. So if you are not in terms with who you are not capable of overcoming
Yeah.
this. So you need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I know who I am.
Yeah.
I know why I do the things I do. I mean, I'm not going to allow somebody else to tell me who I am.
Right.
I'm not going to allow, social media or the attacks of the regime to determine the way I look at
self-worth.
myself. I know who I
Yeah.
am. I know.
So one of the things I talk about is that I learned through just, my leadership journey and through writing this book is that, I think the thing we need to get to is being authentically yourself. And that's what you have, right? And so I kind of call that authentically self part is your superpower. I think everybody has a superpower. We don't know it. And I would love to do that with people, to be able to sit down with them and talk to them like we're talking now and really think about, okay, what's your superpower? So what do you think your superpower is? If you had to pick one thing that is like, Superman flies,
Yeah.
Batman's rich, there's all these different superpowers. But what is your one superpower?
I'll tell you, my wife and my kids.
Wow. Wow.
That's
So
my
your
superpower.
Your superpower is that connection.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I would have been capable of overcoming all of this without my wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
This is the Less Than 1% podcast. Tune in to the next episode for part 2.